Okay, so a lot of people have been asking for a rod building video, so I'm gonna do one. This is a Bull Bay. I want to say it's a 7.5 foot, 8 foot. I'm not sure 100% on the specs. This is my first build with a Bull Bay rod, but we're gonna be putting Fuji K-Guides double foot all the way up. Colors of choice are silver and black. It's just a 10-inch forward fighting grip so it would sit like this in front of the fighting grip, which I'm probably going to screen it down, turn this and screen it down some to size to fit to the customer's hand a little better. But that's how it's going to look together. And then of course your fighting butt, and in between they're not going to do a grip. Maybe do a deco wrap or something between it, but essentially it'll sit on the rod, so you'll have this, and then your fighting butt would be down here at the end, of course. But yeah, this is the rod length that I'm going to start with, and we'll get into it, and we'll start with step by step. I'm going to start, obviously it's a from scratch, just the blank here, and yeah, we'll go ahead and get into the first step here, and that'll be installing the fighting butt. So this is the epoxy that I'm gonna, or the adhesive that I'm going to use to install the fighting butt. Personally, this is what I like to use. I've never had a problem with it. It's a hardener and a resin, so you have to make sure you do equal parts or it will not work out. But I'm gonna go ahead and do my equal parts of separating for you, and that way you can see. And whenever you do this, with this product especially, do not, do not mix whatever you're using out of this into your other container. Like if you're using one stick to pull it out, that's the only stick you use for that. Like since I use that stick for this one, I'm not going to use that same stick in the resin, because then you will create a mess. And like I said, you get one part of each. So I'm going to get me some more. Something like that. And since I am going to be throwing these sticks away, now that I've done this, I can mix them up. You want to mix it fairly good. You don't want it to show you. And all the excess that's on the stick, you want to make sure all that, because if any of it doesn't get mixed, it will not harden properly. You'll have some spots that are soft, some spots that are harder than others, and you don't want that. Then you can have a chance of, I don't know if you've ever had a problem where you've bought a store-bought rod and the fighting butt or the gimbal has become disattached or just doesn't stick very well and it just comes unglued. That's because the way that they did it at the manufacturer, they didn't put enough hardener or resin or vice versa. But I'm just going to put a thin little layer on this back piece back here. And you don't want to put it up any further than what the fighting butt itself. You put this on here and it'll move some of this stuff around, which is what you want it to do, but you don't want to go too far up on the actual butt of the reel or the butt of the rod itself. So, because like I said, the fighting butt will push a lot of it up and will move some of the product around, and that's okay. The more you have up under your fighting butt, the better, less chances of it sliding off. But when you build a rod, you build from the bottom up. Never start from the top and work your way down. Just doesn't work. But go ahead and put this on here and twist it as you put it on. And of course you see all that excess there coming up, which is fine. And once you have that, then you just grab you a paper towel. Grab a paper towel, put a little denatured alcohol on it, so that way none of the remainder stuff gets on anything, makes anything sticky. But you just want to clean up that excess all the way around. Clean up the excess. You want to just, make sure there ain't nothing there. Especially with a build that like this one here, there's not going to be any padding or any cushion, to say the least, for back here for the foregrip, because the handle and the real seat, or the real seat essentially, is going to sit about right there, because they want it forearm length for the individual that I'm building this rod for. They want it about forearm length. So with the fighting butt there to where the real seat would fit, that's about my personal forearm length there. So alright, so now that I've got this part done, now the real seat's on there and everything's ready to go. Alright, so now that the real seat is on the rod, it's glued, it's in place, now it's time to add my a little over 10.5 inch, probably pushing 12 inch forward grip. So I'll pick out my reamer that's gonna best suit me, so it looks like that one's gonna be my best bet. I'm just gonna ream out some of the EVA, and probably want to do this over your trash can or something of that nature. That way it does not make a mess everywhere, because this stuff makes a mess when you ream it out. Alright, so now it's reamed out some. I'm going to check it, and got to be able to go all the way down to here. And it's okay if you have to put a little pressure to put it on, but this is the reason why you build from the bottom of the rod to the top of the rod. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and just slide the EVA over the blank, slide it down the blank. Alright, and it's starting to get a little snug right there. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's exactly how I want it, because it's nice and tight here. Alright, cool. So it fits all the way down just like I needed it to. And some things you're going to have to ream longer than others, but this one's going to fit on there just like that. And yeah. So I'm going to get some glue on there, and we'll get this forward grip glued down and be moving on to the next step, which would be next step will be to apply the glue in this places that it's going to be needed it, or that's going to need it. So I'm going to mark here on my Chinatown. So between this line and here, I need a glue. So I'm going to mix up some more. Alright, so now that I got my glue mixed up and ready to go, we'll go ahead and lay my glue in between this area here. Make sure that you have it all the way wrapped around the blank, and just spread it on there. And like I said, you want to put the thicker stuff towards the top, because it's all going to be pushed down by the EVA. And with it being a snug fit, you don't need a lot. So you just more so make it thicker towards the top, because that way whatever gets pushed down will get pushed down by the EVA itself. And just going to keep working around this rod, you know. Alright, so for now, for installing the foregrip, I'm going to take and put a thin layer of tape right here across the front of this reel seat, so whatever excess glue gets pushed down by the EVA will not get on the top part of this reel seat. It's very important that you don't get it on the top of it, just because you don't want to have to go back and worry about it later. And it just helps keep it protected. I'm going to do the same thing on the actual EVA grip itself. That way none of this stuff gets onto the top part of the EVA, because man, if this stuff gets on the EVA, it's going to become part of it. So you don't want any of this glue to get onto the EVA, because it'll make it really shiny. Although I can probably almost guarantee that I'm going to end up getting a screen and making it a little bit smaller diameter on this, but for now this will be good. And go ahead and just slide it over the tip of your rod. So the glue is already on there, and so I'm just going to take and slide it over the tip of the rod and just let it fall all the way down. And now that it's to this point, it's stopped right at the glue. Well, I like to sit down and do this part because I can grab it with both hands and just really just twist it and push down. Alright, well, now that that is on there and conjoined fairly good, it's all the way down just like I want it to be. No wobble and none of the room. So it's starting to become to look like a rod, isn't it? But we will get this thing back on up here, and back here I can go ahead and pull off this tape because it's not having a purpose anymore. Just peel it off. That keeps any of the extra glue that got on, you know, past that point. It keeps it from getting on there. And I can go ahead and actually pull the EVA one off as well, because luckily for me, I didn't put too much glue on there, so it didn't have a lot of extra runoff. Same for this. I did pretty good on this one, actually. I'm pretty proud of myself. And there you go. So there's your foregrip, your reel seat, and your fighting butt all installed. And so from here, the next step will be figuring out my guide spacing, how far apart I want my guides to sit, you know, how close or how far I want them to sit. Running double foot Fuji guides on this rod here, but that's a kind of an idea of what it would look like. And so yeah, I'll get back to you whenever I get ready to start doing the guide part. Okay, so now I'm going to show you guys how to do the underwrap for if you're running double foot guides, and how to make it look like that. And I'll wrap over the feet with black, so all you'll see is silver and black, and it'll look really nice and clean finish. but I will show you how I do this, which is not very hard at all. But I've already got all my spacings measured out. There's all the spacings there. So for this guide foot, it's going to be this guide. And the S marks where I'm going to put silver at. So between this line and this line is going to be silver. All the rest of this is going to be black. I kind of do the other marks to kind of show myself where the guide foot itself starts and where it ends. And so I'm going to go ahead and get this going and start wrapping the foot on. Alright, so I'm starting off with a black thread. I'm going to wrap it away from me, so that way when I rotate the rod, I'm going to take this line and I'm just going to wrap it over itself one time, follow it around. And as you can hear, there is some tension on this line. But that's how you get it started. Once you get it started, burnishing tool, and come back and push the threads closer together so it's nice and tight. You're going to do that for a few minutes. You're going to wrap this a couple of times. And you can either use a straight razor or precision scissors. I prefer the precision scissors, which these are them. They cut real close, which is nice when you're doing this kind of stuff. And you just run your burnishing tool right on the outside of the thread. You don't want to push too hard, because if you do, it'll cause it to overlap itself and you will start stacking threads on top of each other. For fly tying and jig making, that's okay. Rod building, not okay. So, just going to keep wrapping it. I wish I had a power wrapper. I'm all doing this all by hand. So, just keep running this. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to, I'm going to add in the silver here, like how I had it on the other guide. So, and now, I mean, if you have a nicer setup than what I got, that's awesome, but I'm working with what I have and I make do with it. But basically I'm going to lay the thread under, so you can rest it like so. And the way that I'm doing it now is just going to be a single strand that I'm running. You can run up to, I wouldn't do any more than 3 or 4 personally. It's really your own personal preference if you want to do it that way. But you just basically run the silver right beside the black, side by side, and if you run it right, it'll stack itself just fine. And seeing that I don't have a good thread carrier, I have to constantly keep spinning it off the spool, and I have to rotate the rod myself because I don't have a power wrapper at the time currently, so I'm saving up for it. I just got to get a couple rod builds under my belt and I will start using a power wrapper, or I will buy a power wrapper, to say the least. But with the silver, you just keep running it alongside itself. And you keep your burnishing tool by you. Every once in a while, tap your threads, make sure everything stays nice and snug. You don't want any spacing, because whenever you go to do the epoxy, if this was 2 different colors or lighter colors, you would see it really well. but it's silver and black on a black blank, so it won't show up too bad. But I don't settle for that kind of stuff, so I try to go for perfection if I can. And I will take the time and do it one thing at a time if I have to. I do not mind. Does not bother me at all. But like I said, eventually I will have a power wrapper, and that'll save me bukus of time, and I will be able to do more rods for people. Right now I just build locally for some of the local guys, mainly buddies. There's a couple of rods around that's got my name on them. Not very many because I just started. So with this video I may go back in a couple of years and say, oh wow, that was bad, but that's how you learn, right? So just keep doing this until I get to my next line, which is right there. Once I get to that line, that's where I'll stop and I'll do another tie off. Alright, so now that we're getting to a tie off point, we'll wrap it one more time. Right there's good. Get my precision scissors, cut the silver, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it under itself and then keep the black. There we go. Alright. Drop my burnish tool. Whoops. Alright, now I got it back in hand. Continue back to what I was doing. And I'm going to wrap it all the way up to this point here. That second mark is not necessary. That mark's not really necessary. That was just for mentally for me. But this is the mark that I'm going to stop at, and that'll be the perfect spacing to put the guide on. You can go ahead and cut off all the excess, like so. There we go. Alright, and I'll just continue to do this. Alright, so now we are to a tie-off point. We're to a tie-off point, as you can see. The China chalk is starting to show right here on this end piece. Go ahead and kind of scratch that away a little bit. And I like to use a different color strand whenever I do this, so I can just kind of see the two different spots. So I'm going to cut me a little strand of purple. I don't know how well you can see it on the camera, but make a loop with it. Just make a little half U, if you will, and then slide it behind it and up underneath the thread. So then it looks like that. And then you're just going to continue to wrap the thread over the top of the purple one. And you want to continue to keep it as tight as possible. Don't want to overdo it though, because then you won't be able to pull the thread through. But I do about 4 to 5 wraps, which that's about 4 or 5 there. And hold it with your finger. Make sure you keep pressure, because you let go of it, your whole wrap's going to come undone. And keep pressure. Cut you a little piece off, or cut the piece, the tag end that's still attached. Feed it through that loop. Oops. Work with me here. My speaker turned off. Bluetooth speaker, that is. Feed it through the loop. Make sure you grab that tag in tight. And then from there, you're just going to, here, I'm going to try to get a little better view. And from there, you're just going to pull that. And it should look just like so. And once you've done that, then you take your precision scissors or razor blade and you cut it. And that's how you do the under wrap for your guides. So now, when I go to wrap the guide on there, it'll sit just like so. Have the silver on the front, and it'll look nice. It'll look really nice. It'll sit just like so. And I think that'll come out real nice. Yep. Alright, so the next step that we're going to do is going to start by getting ready to install the guides. Alright, so as you see, I have all the guides laid out onto the rod all the way down. And so what I'm going to do is the same way that I was doing the foot wrap, or the under wrap, I'm sorry. The same way I was doing this under wrap is the same way you're going to essentially tie your guides down, your guide feet. And so I want to start about right there. Yeah, right there. And we'll go ahead and do just like I was saying before, you do the single wrap around. It's really raining outside. Anyways, do a really single wrap around. Follow it, follow it. And I would, if you can, I use zip ties to hold my guides on. There's other ways you can do it. You can buy little rubber bands and stuff like that. But I like to have the zip ties because I can adjust the attention, or how much tension is on the actual thread itself, or the guide itself, to hold it in place, or if I need to shift it around. Which, that is another thing. It makes it really easy to move the guide foot around whenever you just have a little zip tie holding it on there. But right now I'm just packing the threads close together so there's no spacing. This little access here, I can go ahead and trim it off. And use a razor blade, X-Acto knife, it doesn't matter. If this is something you have not done with a razor blade, I would not suggest doing it, because if you cut the under wrap, it could be bad. I've done it. I've learned from my experience to be very careful with doing that, because it only takes just a second, and everything that you've worked on is now got to be redone. One thing I did not record, and I apologize, if you want me to go back and actually record it, I will, is just putting color preserve on, which is stuff that you apply with like a nylon brush, or one of those cheap brushes, and you just put an even layer coat of it, and that's what it's called, color preserve. But you just put an even layer on the threads all the way across, and it helps protect it from sun damage and whatnot. Keep your colors and stuff really bright if you have bright colors. But with this one, it's just a dark rod, so I mean, and it'll fade too, don't get me wrong, it'll turn like that gold weird color. It's like sun bleaching or whatever. But you do this. And with this, you gotta be a little bit more, you gotta pick at it some more, and really good lighting really pays off on this part. Just one of the few things that I'm still working on getting. But with what I have, I am able to tie or build up rods. You know, some people have some really nice workbenches out there, the rod tying benches. But you just keep doing this. Make sure all your threads are nice and tight. I'm essentially just pushing the thread over, making it flush. Ooh, that was almost bad. That was almost bad. So I just see I have to back it off now and come back and relay it, because that could have been really, really bad if I didn't have color preserve on. Could have risked the chance of popping the thread, and that would have been no good whatsoever. But now we're back on the right track again. You can see right there where I slipped and almost really made a really big issue. But it's okay, nothing broke, and I can continue on with the build. Alright, so now we're getting towards the guide foot a little bit more. We'll take, and you may have to guide it some, you may have to guide the thread itself into its place for a few minutes until it actually, lays properly into place. You'll have at times where it'll skip off the guide foot or push the guide foot away. And this is why I personally like the zip ties, because the zip ties, you can kind of cinch it down really well to the rod, and keeps the guide from slipping back or slipping forward, which is really helpful. I've personally experienced with the rubber bands, the guide foot will slide or the guide will start sliding away from you, and that can tend to be really irritating, especially if you're trying to get a build done at a reasonable time, or you want to get it done before you go on a fishing trip soon. That can be really, really aggravating. I know I've done it a couple of times, and now that is why I'm able to tell you from my experience why I like the zip ties. I'm sure somebody's going to say that I could damage the rod. But, mind you, I do not use the zip ties if I'm not doing a under wrap. If I do not do an under wrap, I don't use the zip ties. All my inshore stuff, I use the little rubber bands, go to the dollar store or the Dollar Tree or whatever the cheap store is in your town, and pick up some cheap bag of rubber bands of like 100, and you'll be good to go. And it's slowly working its way up the foot here. This part you have to take your time with. I haven't got to experience this part on a power wrapper yet, so nervous but not nervous. I'm excited. I really want to get one soon as possible. So I gotta save up and get my money in order, and I'll get myself one. But until then, I will continue to do it this way, and I do not mind. Because the way I look at this is, if I can do this without having electricity right now, like let's say the power went out for whatever reason, I could still continue to wrap rods and not have to rely on a power wrapper, just because I've had the obedience of using a hand wrapper, I guess you would call it, or a manual. And that's all there really is to it, to wrapping the guide foot on. banjo. Boing, boing. Oops, oops. And you can pop the strands just like this too if you're not careful. It's getting to a point to where I'm able to just not really have to guide it anymore. It kind of falls into place as long as you keep, your thread just a little offset from where it's laying. That way it kind of rolls over onto itself and lays flat. Every once in a while you'll stop after you've got a little rhythm going. You'll stop and come back and pick at it and make sure you push all your threads all the way over and make sure it's nice and compact. Alright, so how to tie it off at the guide foot. It's the same way that you do the tie off, just like whenever you do the under wrap tie off. But you don't ever want to take and do a tie off on the guide foot itself. You want to roll it over towards the back side where you got a flat surface to work with. You're going to get your different color thread, run it up underneath. Just like I said, just like how you do with your finish wrap or your under wrap, you do the exact same thing for here. And I'm going to keep packing it as I do this. That way it's a nice, good, nice and packed in. Sorry, I went blank there for a second. You don't want to go all the way up on the guide foot with the thread. That's a no-no. So that's 4 wraps. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it around one more time to give it 5. The 5th wrap will go up underneath itself. Alright. Once again, make sure you have pressure on this. So you can do that. Use my my line cutter flush mount. Works. What I need to do is actually mount it onto this board. Line cutters is an awesome product. I use it a lot for fishing. No, I am not sponsored by them or anything. I just really enjoy their product. I have a buddy of mine, Ty, who is good friends with Vince, and that's about all I know. Other than it's a good company, and I use it for fishing, rod building, anything. But there, that foot is now down and secured, which now allows me to, I could remove this if I want to, but I'm not going to remove it, and I'm going to tell you why. Because when I go to wrap the thread this way, I don't want this to push. Obviously it's not going to move, but I do not want the guide foot to move from left to right. Seeing that it is already aligned with the reel seat, so that way if I have to move it or adjust it, it won't cause any issues in the threads. Yeah, there we go. We're good with that. Next is same thing for going up the foot. Alright, so now I'm going to start wrapping up the rod. With taper rods, it's very important that you keep your tension on your line at all times, and you always want to push up You don't want to push down. Like, you don't want to just go whoop, whoop, and start pushing it down, because if you do, you're going to push that backwards. Get this stupid, there we go. Alright, so once again, once you get towards the guide foot, you want to slow back down again. And make sure you're just getting an even stack up the guide foot. You don't want it to look all sloppy and kinked up and whatnot. Alright, so now that I've gotten a little bit of the guide foot actually covered up, I can go ahead and get rid of the zip tie, because it is no longer serving a purpose other than staying in my way for picking at the threads. So I like to use a little like wire snips, if you will, to take them off. Maybe get them really quick. Oh. Just got some little wire snips here that I'm using to get it off. Do be very careful. I have made the mistake and have cut the thread. So now I just cut the box. Alright. Just cut the box off and continue to pack your threads and keep everything nice and tight. Alright, so that's how you attach a guide foot with an under wrap. And you just move all the way down the rod and you just repeat the process all the way down. That's That's all you do. Cut down on the time frame. I wanted to get this rod done a little bit quicker, so I went ahead and did the epoxy on it. And so this is the finished product. It's not bad. I'm happy with the outcome. I'm sure the customer will be as well.